Okay, today is 28th of July. Continue with the Nidana Samyutta. We come to Sutta 12.67. On one occasion, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Mahathera were dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. Then in the evening, the Venerable Mahathera emerged from seclusion and approached the Venerable Sariputta. He exchanged greetings with the Venerable Sariputta, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, How is it, friend? How is it, friend Sariputta? Is aging and death created by oneself, or is it created by another? Or is it created both by oneself and by another? Or has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another? Friend Kotita, aging and death is not created by oneself, nor is it created by another, nor is it created both by oneself and another, nor has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor another, but rather with birth as condition, age and death comes to be. This fortuitously is by chance. How is it, friend Sariputta? Is birth created by oneself? This existence, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the six sense bases, name and namarupa, mentality and materiality, are created by oneself? Or is it created by another? Or is it created both by oneself and by another? Or has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another? Mentality and materiality, friend Kotita, is not created by oneself, nor is it created by another, nor is it created both by oneself and by another, nor has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another, but rather with consciousness as condition, mentality and materiality comes to be. How is it, friend Sariputta? Is consciousness created by oneself, or is it created by another, or is it created both by oneself and by another, or has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another? Consciousness, friend Kotita, is neither created by oneself nor is it created by another, nor is it created both by oneself and by another, nor has it arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another, but rather with mentality and materiality as condition, consciousness comes to be. Now we understand the Venerable Sariputta's statement thus. Mentality and materiality, friend Kotita, is not created by oneself, but rather with consciousness as condition, mentality and materiality comes to be. Now we also understand the Venerable Sariputta's other statement thus. Consciousness, friend Kotita, is not created by oneself, etc., but rather with mentality and materiality as condition, consciousness comes to be. But how, friend Sariputta, should the meaning of this statement be seen? Well then, friend, I will make up a simile for you. For some intelligent people here understand the meaning of a statement by means of a simile. Just as two sheaves of reeds might stand leaning against each other, so too with mentality and materiality as condition, consciousness comes to be. With consciousness as condition, mentality and materiality comes to be. With mentality and materiality as condition, the six sense bases come to be. With the six sense bases as condition, contact, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Venerable Sariputta continued, If, friend, one were to remove one of those sheaves of reeds, the other would fall, and if one were to remove the other sheaf, the first would fall. So too, with the cessation of mentality and materiality comes cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness comes cessation of mentality and materiality. With the cessation of mentality and materiality comes cessation of the six sense bases. With the cessation of the six sense bases, cessation of contact, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. We'll stop here for a moment. So here, Venerable Sariputta is trying to explain that mentality and materiality and consciousness, they are a pair. They arise together and cease together. They stand supporting each other. So when one of them falls, the other also falls. One cannot exist without the other. So that's why he says, in one place he says, consciousness conditions mentality, materiality. And on the other hand, he also says that mentality, materiality conditions consciousness. So you can see it in either way. Although the Paticca Samuppada, the formula independent origination, I say that consciousness conditions mentality and materiality, but as said here, you can also say that mentality and materiality conditions consciousness. Venerable Mahakotita said, "It is wonderful, friend Sariputta. It is amazing, friend Sariputta. How well this has been stated by the Venerable Sariputta. Rejoice in the Venerable Sariputta statement on these 36 grounds. If friend, a monk teaches the Dhamma for the purpose of revulsion towards aging and death, for its fading away and cessation, he can be called a monk who is a speaker on the Dhamma. If a monk is practicing for the purpose of revulsion towards aging and death, for its fading away and cessation, he can be called a monk who is practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. If through revulsion towards aging and death, through its fading away and cessation, a monk is liberated by non-clinging, he can be called a monk who has attained Nibbana in this very life. Similarly, if friend, a monk teaches the Dhamma for the purpose of revulsion towards birth or existence of clinging, craving, feeling, contact, six sense bases, mentality and materiality, consciousness, volition, ignorance, for its fading away and cessation, he can be called a monk who is a speaker on the Dhamma. If a monk is practicing for the purpose of revulsion towards ignorance, or its fading away and cessation, he can be called a monk who is practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. If through revulsion towards ignorance, through its fading away and cessation, a monk is liberated by non-clinging, he can be called a monk who has attained Nibbana in this very life. It's the end of the sutta. So in this second part, Venerable Sariputta says that Venerable Mahakotita said the Venerable Sariputta statement, he rejoices on 36 grounds. What is this 36 grounds? 36 reasons, according to the commentary, obtained by taking 3 cases in relation to each of the 12 terms. The first is the quality of being a speaker on the Dhamma. The second is the practice of the Dhamma. The third is the fruit of the practice of the Dhamma. So 3 times 12, because there are 12 links, so you get 36. Now here you see, it says, if a monk teaches the Dhamma for the purpose of revulsion towards aging and death, or for the purpose of revulsion towards any one of these 12 links, then he is really called a speaker of the Dhamma. So the purpose of speaking the Dhamma is to teach people to have revulsion towards these conditions that give rise to suffering, for letting go of the worldly pleasures, letting go of the round of rebirths. And then if a monk is practicing for the purpose of revulsion towards suffering or any of the conditions giving rise to suffering, then he is called a monk who is practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. And if a person has already achieved revulsion towards suffering and all that, then he is liberated. So here, a real speaker of the Dhamma is one who teaches people to have revulsion towards suffering and all the conditions for suffering. And nowadays sometimes you get people who speak on the Dhamma and they speak a lot about worldly Dhamma. It's nothing to do with the Buddha's teachings. So that is not called a speaker of the Dhamma. The next sutta is 12.68. On one occasion, the Venerable Musila, the Venerable Savita, and the Venerable Narada, and the Venerable Ananda were living at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Then the Venerable Savita said to the Venerable Musila, "Friend Musila, apart from faith, apart from personal preference, apart from oral tradition, apart from reasoned reflection, apart from acceptance of a view after pondering it, does the Venerable Musila have personal knowledge thus? With birth as condition, aging and death comes to be." And he said, "Friend Savita, apart from faith, apart from personal preference, apart from oral tradition, apart from reason, reflection, apart from acceptance of a view after pondering it. I know this, I see this, with birth as condition, aging and death comes to be. Again he asks, friend Musila, apart from faith, apart from acceptance of a view after pondering it, does the Venerable Musila have personal knowledge thus, with existence as condition, birth, etc., etc., with ignorance as condition, volition? And he replied, friend Savita, apart from faith, etc., apart from acceptance of a view, I know this, I see this, with ignorance as condition, volition. Again, Venerable Savita asks, friend Musila, apart from faith, etc., apart from acceptance of a view, does the Venerable Musila have personal knowledge? With the cessation of birth comes cessation of aging and death, etc. With the cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. And he replies, friend Savita, apart from faith, etc., I know this, I see this. With the cessation of birth comes cessation of aging and death, etc. With the cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. Friend Musila, apart from faith, apart from personal preference, apart from oral tradition, apart from reason, reflection, apart from acceptance of a view, after pondering it, does the Venerable Musila have personal knowledge thus? Nibbana is the cessation of existence. And he replied, friend Savita, apart from faith, apart from personal preference, apart from oral tradition, apart from reason, reflection, apart from acceptance of a view after pondering it, I know this, I see this. Nibbana is the cessation of existence. And then Venerable Savita said, then the Venerable Musila is an Arahant, one whose asavas are destroyed. When this was said, the Venerable Musila kept silent. Stop here for a moment. So here you see, Venerable Savita is asking a series of questions to test the Venerable Musila whether he is an Arahant. So Venerable Musila answered that he has personal experience of all these states, which implies that he is an Arahant. So when Venerable Savita said that Venerable Musila must be an Arahant, he kept silent. When he kept silent, it means that he is an Arahant. Because when he's an Arahant, he won't boast like he's an Arahant. But if he were not an Arahant, then he would have to deny it. Since he kept silent, that means he is implying that he's an Arahant. Then the Venerable Narada said to the Venerable Savita, friend Savita, it would be good if I were asked that series of questions. Ask me that series of questions and I will answer you. So Venerable Narada here is inviting Venerable Savita to ask him the same questions. So Venerable Savita asked Venerable Narada the same series of questions and he received the same replies as Venerable Musila gave. And Venerable Savita said, then the Venerable Narada is an Arahant, one whose asavas are destroyed. And Venerable Narada replied, friend, though I have clearly seen as it really is with correct wisdom, Nibbana is the cessation of existence. I am not an Arahant, one whose asavas are destroyed. Suppose, friend, there was a well along a desert road, but it had neither a rope nor a bucket. Then a man would come along, oppressed and afflicted by the heat, tired, parched and thirsty. He would look down into the well, and the knowledge would occur to him, there is water, but he would not be able to make bodily contact with it. So too, friend, though I have clearly seen as it really is with correct wisdom, Nibbana is the cessation of existence. I am not an Arahant, one whose asavas are destroyed. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda asked the Venerable Savita, when he speaks in such a way, friend Savita, what would you say about the Venerable Narada? When he speaks in such a way, friend Ananda, I would not say anything about the Venerable Narada except what is good and favorable. That's the end of the sutta. So here, Venerable Narada, although he says he is not an Arahant, but he has seen with wisdom, Nibbana is the cessation of existence and the other conditions. So it means that he is an Anagamin, has attained the third fruit. The only thing is Just like this person, he has seen the water, but he cannot touch the water, meaning that the Arhan can see the water and can touch the water. So there's a difference that he sees all these states, and yet he has not achieved the final condition. The difference between an Anagamin and the Arhan is that the Arhan has destroyed the 5 higher fetters. 5 higher fetters. Let me see. It's attachment to the form existence, attachment to the formless existence, conceit. Conceit is the ego, restlessness, and ignorance. So this Anagamin, he has seen the Dhamma clearly, and yet he still has the self. So he hasn't finished his work. I come to the final sutta that I'm going to talk in this Nidana Samyutta, 12.70. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the spiritual sanctuary. On that occasion, the Blessed One was honored, respected, esteemed, venerated, and revered. And he obtained robes, alms, food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites. The Bhikkhu Sangha too was honored, respected, esteemed, venerated, and revered. And the bhikkhus or the monks too obtained robes, alms, food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites. But the wanderers of other sects were not honored, respected, esteemed, venerated, and revered, and they did not obtain robes, alms, food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites. Now, on that occasion, the wanderer Susima was residing in Rajagaha, along with a large company of wanderers. Then his company said to the wanderer Susima, "Come, friend Susima, lead the holy life under the ascetic Gautama. Master his Dhamma and teach it to us. We will master his Dhamma and preach it to the lay people. Thus we too will be honored, respected, esteemed, venerated, and revered, and we too will obtain robes, alms, food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites." "All right, friends," the wanderer Susima replied. He then approached the Venerable Ananda and exchanged greetings with him. When they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, "Friend Ananda, I wish to lead the holy life in this Dhammavinaya." Then the Venerable Ananda took the wanderer Susima and approached the Blessed One. He paid homage to the Blessed One, and then he sat down to one side and said to him, "Venerable Sir, this wanderer Susima says that he wishes to lead the holy life in this Dhammavinaya." "Well then, Ananda, give him the going forth." The wanderer Susima then received the going forth and the higher ordination under the Blessed One. Stop here for a moment. So you see these external wanderers, they saw that the Buddha and his disciples were getting a lot of offerings, whereas they were getting very few offerings. So they thought it must be because the people like the Buddha's Dhamma. So if they also learn the Buddha's Dhamma, they will also get a lot of offerings. So they asked Susima to go and learn the Dhamma. On that occasion, a number of monks had declared final knowledge in the presence of the Blessed One, saying, "We understand, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being." The Venerable Susima heard about this, so he approached those monks, exchanged greetings with them, and then sat down to one side and said to them, "Is it true that you, Venerable Ones, have declared final knowledge in the presence of the Blessed One, saying, 'We understand, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more for this state of being?'" "Yes, friend," they replied. And then he said, "Then knowing and seeing thus, do you, Venerable Ones, wield the various kinds of spiritual psychic power, such that, having been one, you become many? That means one body, you multiply into many bodies. Having been many, you become one. You appear and vanish. You go unhindered through a wall, through a rampart, through a mountain as though through space. You dive in and out of the earth as though it were water. You walk on water without sinking, as though it were earth. Seated cross-legged, you travel in space like a bird. With your hand you touch and stroke the moon and sun, so powerful and mighty. You exercise mastery with the body as far as the Brahma world. Stop here for a moment. This exercise mastery with the body as far as the Brahma world means with the flesh body, they can fly as far as the Brahma world, the first jhana, heavens, and not further. And then they replied, no friend. In other words, they don't have all this psychic power. Then he said, then knowing and seeing thus, do you, venerable ones, with the divine ear element, which is purified and surpasses the human, hear both kinds of sounds, the divine and human, those that are far as well as near? And they said, no friend. Then knowing and seeing thus, do you, venerable ones, understand the minds of other beings and persons, having encompassed them with your own minds? Do you understand a mind with lust as a mind with lust, a mind without lust as a mind without lust, a mind with hatred as a mind with hatred, a mind without hatred as a mind without hatred, a mind with delusion as a mind with delusion, a mind without delusion as a mind without delusion, a contracted mind as contracted, and a distracted mind as distracted, an exalted mind as exalted, and an unexalted mind as unexalted, a surpassable mind as surpassable, and an unsurpassable mind as unsurpassable, a concentrated mind as concentrated, and an unconcentrated mind as unconcentrated, a liberated mind as liberated, and an unliberated mind as unliberated. And they said, no friend. So here, he is asking them, if you don't have all the various types of psychic powers, you have the divine ear, the heavenly ear, surely. And they said, no. And he said, if you don't have, then maybe you have the ability to read other people's minds. And they also said, no. Then knowing and seeing thus, do you, venerable ones, recollect your manifold past abodes, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 births, 1,000, 100,000 births, many aeons of world contraction, many aeons of world expansion, many aeons of world contraction and expansion thus. There I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such was my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere, and there too I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn here. Do you thus recollect your manifold past abodes with their modes and details? No friend, they replied. So he's asking them whether they can see their past lives, and still they say no. Then knowing and seeing thus, do you, venerable ones, with the divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, see beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and understand how beings fare on in accordance with their karma? Thus, these beings who engaged in misconduct of body, speech and mind, who reviled the noble ones, the Aryans, held wrong view, and undertook actions based on wrong view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in a state of misery, in a bad destination, in the nether world, in hell. But those beings who engaged in good conduct of body, speech or mind, who did not revile the noble ones, who held right view, and undertook action based on right view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Thus, with the divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, you see beings passing away and being reborn, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and understand how beings fare on in accordance with their karma. No, friend. So here he's asking them whether they have the divine eye, heavenly eye, and they said no. How come he's asking all these questions? Probably because one of the reasons the Buddha and the disciples have become so famous and receive so much support is because people know they have all these psychic powers. Then he said, then knowing and seeing thus, do you, venerable ones, dwell in those peaceful deliverances that transcend forms, the formless attainments, having touched them with the body? And they said, no, friend. We'll stop here for a moment. So here the last part is asking whether they have attained the states of meditation where the formless attainments, that means they have passed beyond form, the arupa jhana, they have attained the arupa jhanas, meaning the base of boundless space, the base of boundless consciousness, the base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. These are the 4 arupa jhanas, which are the very high states of meditation. And they also said no. And then he said, here now, Venerable Ones, this answer and the non-attainment of those states, how could this be, friends? And they said, we are liberated by wisdom, friends Susima. And he said, I do not understand in detail, friends, the meaning of what has been stated in brief by the Venerable Ones. It would be good if the Venerable Ones would explain to me in such a way that I could understand in detail what has been stated in brief. And they said, whether or not you understand, friends Susima, we are liberated by wisdom. I'll stop here for a moment. So here he's asking them, you all claim that you have attained the goal of the holy life. You have become liberated from the round of rebirths and all that. But how is it when I ask you all these states, psychic powers and all that, you say you don't have all these? Then they said, that's because we are liberated by wisdom. And then he asked them to explain, and they refused to explain. Earlier we read some sutta where it was mentioned there were a group of arahants, and the Buddha said, I think the group was 500 arahants, and the Buddha said 60 of them have the threefold knowledge, 60 of them have the sixfold knowledge, 60 of them are liberated by mind, or 2 ways liberated, and the rest are all liberated by wisdom. So out of these 500, you see 120 have the threefold knowledge and the sixfold knowledge, which means psychic power. So 120 out of 500 is about 1/4. So about 1/4 of arahants, after they become liberated, only 1/4 have psychic power. 3/4 generally don't have psychic power. So here they say they don't have psychic power and they are liberated by wisdom. It is suttas like this that the commentary makes a mistake. The commentary says that this refers to, this means that the arahants who are liberated by wisdom, who don't have psychic power, means that they don't have any jhana. They equate jhana with psychic power. They think once a person attains jhana, he must have psychic power. So these arahants don't have psychic power, therefore they don't have jhana. But here, the last part that he asked, they have not attained the formless jhanas, arupa jhanas. But in other suttas, the Buddha says, to attain arahanthood, you must have at least the 4 jhanas. The 4 jhanas are enough to make a person an arahant, if he studies the Dhamma also, in addition to the 4 jhanas. And if he attains the arupa jhanas, it's a bonus, but it's not a necessary condition. That's a mistake the commentaries make. From here they talk about the pure vipassana arahant, which does not need any jhana. This totally contradicts the suttas. Buddha said in the Majjhima Nikaya that it's impossible to destroy the 5 lower fetters without the 4 jhanas. Person who destroys the 5 lower fetters is the Anagamin and the Arahant. Then the Venerable Susima rose from his seat and approached the Blessed One. Having approached, he paid homage to the Blessed One, sat down to one side, and reported to the Blessed One the entire conversation he had had with those monks. The Blessed One said, first Susima comes knowledge of the stability of the Dhamma, afterwards knowledge of Nibbana. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, first a person has knowledge of the stability of the Dhamma. Basically means a person has knowledge of the Dhamma. Then because of knowledge of the Dhamma, he has knowledge of Nibbana. That means he attains liberation. And Susima said, I do not understand in detail, Venerable Sir, the meaning of what was stated in brief by the Blessed One. It would be good if the Blessed One would explain to me in such a way that I could understand in detail what has been stated in brief. And the Buddha said, whether or not you understand Susima, first comes knowledge of the stability of the Dhamma, afterwards knowledge of Nibbana. And the Buddha continued, what do you think, Susima? Is form or body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Similarly, is feeling permanent or impermanent? And he answered as before. Is perception permanent or impermanent? Is volition permanent or impermanent? Is consciousness permanent or impermanent? He answered all in the same way. Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is teaching him some Dhamma. The Buddha is asking him about the 5 aggregates, body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. Which these 5 things are basically body and mind, which we take to be the self, or as belonging to the self, or the self is in these 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates are in the self. So the Buddha is trying to make him see that these 5 aggregates which we take to be the self is impermanent. So it is suffering and it's not fit to be regarded as I or mine. Then the Buddha continued. Therefore, Susima, any kind of form whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all forms or bodies should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. So here when we talk about all forms, means our body, whether our body now or body in the past or our bodies in the future, or the bodies that we take to be mine, like my husband, my wife, my children, my parents and all that. The Buddha said, all this you should see with wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Similarly, any kind of feeling whatsoever, any kind of perception, any kind of volition, any kind of consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all of these aggregates should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus Susima, the instructed noble disciple experiences revulsion towards form, revulsion towards feeling, revulsion towards perception, revulsion towards volition, revulsion towards consciousness. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge. It is liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. So here the Buddha makes him understand this Dhamma. And then the Buddha continued. You see Susima, with birth as condition, aging and death comes to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. You see Susima, with being as condition, birth. And he says yes. You see with clinging as condition, existence, etc., with contact, 6 sense basis, etc., with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. And he says, yes, Venerable Sir, to all of this. You see Susima, with the cessation of birth comes cessation of aging and death. Yes, Venerable Sir. You see Susima, with the cessation of being comes cessation of birth. Yes. Similarly, with the cessation of clinging, etc., cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. To all this he says, yes, Venerable Sir. So here, the Buddha is trying to make him see dependent origination of suffering and dependent ceasing of suffering. Basically, after he has stayed with the Buddha for some time, he would have learned all this from the other monks. But here the Buddha is explaining to him to make him see this basic Dhamma which makes a person become liberated. And then the Buddha said, knowing and seeing thus Susima, do you wield the various kinds of spiritual power, such that having been one you become many, etc., etc., and exercise bodily mastery as far as the Brahma world. So here the Buddha is saying, since you understand all this Dhamma, then do you have all these various types of psychic power? He calls psychokinesis. And he says, no, Venerable Sir. Then knowing and seeing that Susima, do you with the divine ear element which is purified and surpasses the human, hear both kinds of sounds, the divine and human, those that are far as well as near? And he said, no, Venerable Sir. Then knowing and seeing that Susima, do you understand the minds of other beings and persons, having encompassed them with your own mind? No, Venerable Sir. Then knowing and seeing that Susima, do you recollect your manifold past abodes with their modes and details? No, Venerable Sir. Then knowing and seeing that Susima, do you with the divine eye which is purified and surpasses the human, see beings passing away and being reborn, and understand how beings fare on in accordance with their karma? No, Venerable Sir. Then knowing and seeing that Susima, do you dwell in those peaceful deliverances that transcend forms, the formless attainments, having touched them with the body? And he said, no, Venerable Sir. And then the Buddha said, hear now, Susima, this answer of yours and the non-attainment of those states, how could this be, Susima? So, let's stop here for a moment. So, the Buddha is repeating exactly what he said earlier. He asked the Arahants, since they have understood the Dhamma and become liberated, how come they don't have all the psychic powers? So the Buddha is also making him understand that having understood all this Dhamma, why is it that you also don't have any psychic power? Then the Venerable Susima prostrated himself with his head at the Blessed One's feet and said, Venerable Sir, I have committed a transgression in that I was so foolish, so confused, so inept, that I went forth as a thief of the Dhamma in such a well-expounded Dhamma Vinaya as this. Venerable Sir, may the Blessed One pardon me for my transgression, seen as a transgression for the sake of future restraint. And the Buddha said, surely Susima, you have committed a transgression in that you were so foolish, so confused, so inept that you went forth as a thief of the Dhamma in such a well-expounded Dhamma Vinaya as this. Suppose, Susima, they were to arrest a bandit, a criminal, and bring him before the king, saying, Sire, this man is a bandit, a criminal. Impose on him whatever punishment you wish. King would say to them, come men, bind this man's arms tightly behind his back with a strong rope, shave his head, and lead him around from street to street and from square to square, beating a drum. Then take him out through the southern gate and to the south of the city, cut off his head. What do you think, Susima? Would that man experience pain and displeasure on that account? Yes, Venerable Sir. And the Buddha said, although that man would experience pain and displeasure on that account, going forth as a thief of the Dhamma in such a well-expounded Dhamma Vinaya as this, has results that are far more painful, far more bitter, and further, it leads to the nether world. But since you see your transgression as a transgression, and make amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma, we pardon you for it. For it is growth in the Noble One's discipline when one sees one's transgression as a transgression, makes amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma, and undertakes future restraint. That's the end of the sutta. So here you see, this Susima, having learned the Dhamma, he realized that he did something very wrong, and he asked for forgiveness. He understood that when a person sees the Dhamma, it's not necessary that he has all these psychic powers. But you see, for him to confess to the Buddha shows that he has understood the Dhamma, shows that I believe he has at least attained stream entry. So having attained stream entry and realized how good the Dhamma is, then only he admitted to the Buddha. You see, there he says, I have committed a transgression in that I was so foolish, so confused. I went forth as a thief of the Dhamma in such a well-expounded Dhamma Vinaya as this. So he realized that the Buddha's Dhamma Vinaya is so perfect, so good, and he is so bad. So at least he has become a stream enterer, and he won't go back to his old friends in the external sect. And if he strove on, he could have become an Arahant. Now we come to, that's the end of the Nidana Samyutta. It took us how many talks? It took us about 6 talks, maybe 5.5. Now we come to the second chapter of the Nidana book. It's the 13th chapter, 13th Samyutta of the whole Samyutta Nikaya. It's called the Abhisamaya Samyutta. It's discourses connected to the topic on the breakthrough to the Dhamma. People who have understood the Dhamma and attained stream entry, how the benefit of it. The first sutta, 13.1. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anatta Pindika's park. Then the Blessed One took up a little bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the monks thus. That means put a bit of soil on the fingernail, so little. And then he asked the monks, "Monks, what do you think? Which is more, the little bit of soil that I have taken up in my fingernail, or this great earth?" And they said, "Remember, sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the Blessed One has taken up in his fingernail is trifling. It does not amount to 100th part, or 1,000th part, or 100,000 part of the great earth." And the Buddha said, "So too, monks, for a noble disciple, a person accomplished in view," that means who has attained right view, who has made the breakthrough, the suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated is more, while that which remains is trifling. The latter does not amount to 100th part, or 1,000th part, or 100,000 part of the former mass of suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated, as there is a maximum of 7 more lives. Of such great benefit, monks, is the breakthrough to the Dhamma. Of such great benefit is it to obtain the vision of the Dhamma. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha says, a person who has attained right view, who has obtained vision of the Dhamma. Vision of the Dhamma is Dhamma Chakku. Sometimes they translate it as the eye of the Dhamma, but vision of the Dhamma is more correct. That means a person who has understood basic understanding of the 4 noble truths. He has become a first path attainer. So such a person has a maximum of 7 more lives before he enters Nibbana. Cannot be more than 7 more lifetimes. Whereas if a person has not attained right view or the vision of the Dhamma, then the lifetimes remaining is countless. So that's why a person with 7 more lifetimes, the suffering is very little, because once he has become an Arya, a stream enterer, the blessing is so great, he'll only be born either in heaven or in the human plane, and in both also he will have a very good life, because even he comes back as a human being, his blessing is so much that he will definitely have a very, very good life. So here, this is the benefit of understanding the Dhamma. It's not the same with attaining jhana, Even if you attain jhana and you have all the various types of psychic power, King Yama is still waiting for you. You are sure to meet up with King Yama as long as you have not understood the Dhamma. But understanding the Dhamma is much, much more important than getting all the various types of psychic power. Of course, the psychic power is advantageous if in addition to psychic power, you learn the Dhamma. Because if you learn the Dhamma with your psychic power, having attained the 4 jhanas, you will understand the Dhamma very fast. But the aim of the holy life is to understand the Dhamma, not to attain all the various types of psychic power. Those are just bonus issues. Most of the suttas in this chapter are all talking about the great benefit of obtaining the vision of the Dhamma. Different types of simile given. Now the other sutta in this Samyutta, Abhisamaya Samyutta, I'm going to read, is the last sutta. At Savatthi, the Buddha said, "Monks, suppose that a man would place on Simaru, the king of mountains, 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans. What do you think, monks?" Sorry, stop here for a moment. This Simaru is supposed to be a huge mountain in heaven. So it should be much bigger than our Himalaya mountains. So the Buddha said, if you place 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans on Mount Sumeru, what do you think, monks, which is more? The 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans that have been placed there, or Sumeru itself, the king of mountains? Noble sir, Sumeru, the king of mountains, is more. The 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans are trifling. They do not amount to 100 part or 1,000 part or 100,000 part of Sumeru, the king of mountains. And the Buddha said, so too monks, the achievement of ascetics, Brahmins and wanderers of other sects do not amount to 100 part or 1,000 part or 100,000 part of the achievement of a noble disciple, a person accomplished in view who has made the breakthrough. So great in achievement, monks, is a person accomplished in view, so great in higher knowledge. Maha That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha says, all those external sect ascetics and Brahmins, with all their psychic powers and all their other achievements, are nothing compared to Aryan disciple of the Buddha who has attained right view. Even if the noble disciple, the stream enterer of the Buddha has only understood the Dhamma and even if he has not attained any psychic power, his achievement is much more beneficial than the achievement of all those external ascetics, even with their psychic powers. So that's how important it is to learn the Dhamma and understand the Dhamma. If you learn and understand the Dhamma, this we say this book is worth its weight in gold, much more than its weight in gold. Now we come to Samyutta number 14, Dhatu Samyutta. Discourses are concerned with the elements. There are various types of elements. The first sutta, 14.1, at Savatthi. Monks, I will teach you the diversity of elements. Listen to that and attend closely, I will speak. Yes, noble sir, those monks replied. The Blessed One said this, and what, monks, is the diversity of elements? The eye element, form element, eye consciousness element, the ear element, sound element, ear consciousness element, the nose element, odor element, nose consciousness element, the tongue element, taste element, tongue consciousness element, the body element, tactile object element, body consciousness element, the mind element, mental phenomena element, mind consciousness element. This, monks, is called the diversity of elements. So here the Buddha is talking about the 18 elements concerned with the six sense organs. The 6 sense organs are the eye, the ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. Here it mentions the sense organs and then the sense object. The sense object is form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thoughts. These objects impinge on your senses. And then with the 2 conditions, the consciousness arises. For example, with the eye and the form present, the eye consciousness will arise. So the third thing is the consciousness. So these are the 18 elements. Now we go to another sutta that talks more about this. 14.4 at Savatthi, the Buddha said, monks, it is in dependence on the diversity of elements that there arises the diversity of contacts. In dependence on the diversity of contacts that there arises the diversity of feelings. And what, monks, is the diversity of elements? Then here, the eye element, he repeats the 18 elements, the eye element, the form element, the eye consciousness, and then the nose, the second one is the ear, and the sound and ear consciousness, and then the nose, odor, and nose consciousness element, etc. Just like just now, the 18 elements. This is called the diversity of elements. And how is it, monks, that in dependence on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of contacts, that in dependence on the diversity of contacts, there arises the diversity of feelings. In dependence on the eye element, there arises eye contact. In dependence on eye contact, there arises feeling born of eye contact. I stop here for a moment now. Here we just consider one sense base. Here the Buddha is saying, first you must have the I element, and then having the I element and the form element, the object of the I. Because of these two conditions, the consciousness arises. And then when the three of them come into contact or meet, there is the eye contact. And once you have the eye contact, feeling arises. The mind starts to work. Feeling arises, and then later followed by other things we will see later. Similarly, independence on the ear element, there arises ear contact. Independence on ear contact, there arises feeling born of ear contact. And similarly for all the other senses. It is in this way, monks, that in dependence on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of contacts. That in dependence on the diversity of contacts, there arises the diversity of feelings. The next sutta is 14.7 at Savatthi. Monks, it is in dependence on the diversity of elements that there arises the diversity of perceptions. In dependence on the diversity of perceptions, that there arises the diversity of intentions. In dependence on the diversity of intentions, that there arises the diversity of desires. In dependence on the diversity of desires, that there arises the diversity of passions. In dependence on the diversity of passions, that there arises the diversity of quests. And what, monks, is the diversity of elements? The form, element, etc., as we read just now, the 18 elements. And how is it, monks, that in dependence on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of perceptions, etc.? In dependence on the form element, we consider one base, one organ, one sense base. In dependence on the form element, there arises perception of form. In dependence on perception of form, there arises intention regarding form. In dependence on intention regarding form, there arises desire for form. In dependence on desire for form, there arises passion for form. In dependence on passion for form, there arises the quest for form. Stop here for a moment. You see, if you have the eye organ, a good eye organ, then form comes before your eye. Then eye consciousness arises. Once eye consciousness arises, if the three of them make contact, then with contact as condition, feeling arises. And once feeling arises, is followed by perception. Perception. Meaning, for example, suppose I see something, and then immediately, because of contact, feeling arises, whether it's a pleasant sight or unpleasant sight. And then after that, you have a certain perception. Oh, this is a beautiful sight, or this is an ugly sight, or this is a frightening sight. So that is the perception. After the perception, there's intention. Once you have the perception, the intention is what you want to do. What you want to do. Then after intention, arises desire for it. Then after the desire, there is passion. Passion, probably greater desire. And then there is the quest for it. You pursue it. And then after that, once you pursue it, then probably you attain it. So similarly, for the other sense organs, independence on the last one here mentioned, independence on the mental phenomena element, there arises perception of mental phenomena. Independence on perception of mental phenomena, there arises intention regarding mental phenomena. Independence on intention regarding mental phenomena, there arises desire for mental phenomena. Independence on desire for mental phenomena, there arises passion for mental phenomena. Independence on passion for mental phenomena, there arises the quest for mental phenomena. It is in this way, monks, that in dependence on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of perceptions. In the dependence on the diversity of perceptions, that there arises the diversity of intentions. Independence on the diversity of intentions, that there arises the diversity of desires. Independence on the diversity of desires, that there arises the diversity of passions. Independence on the diversity of passions, that there arises the diversity of quests. That's the end of the sutta. 14.11. Here talks about the 7 elements. Monks, there are these 7 elements. What 7? the light element, the beauty element, the base of the infinity of space element, the base of the infinity of consciousness element, the base of nothingness element, the base of neither perception nor non-perception element, the cessation of perception and feeling element. These are the 7 elements. And this was said, a certain monk asked the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, as to the light element, etc., in dependence on what are these elements discerned or seen? And the Buddha said, Monk, the light element is discerned in dependence on darkness. Because of darkness, then you can see the light. The beauty element is discerned in dependence on foulness, unattractiveness. The opposite of beauty is unattractiveness or foulness. So by comparison, you say something is beautiful. The base of the infinity of space element is discerned in dependence on form. The base of the infinity of consciousness element is discerned in dependence on the base of the infinity of space. The base of nothingness element is discerned in dependence on the base of the infinity of consciousness. The base of neither perception nor non-perception element is discerned in dependence on the base of nothingness. The cessation of perception and feeling element is discerned in dependence on cessation. But Venerable Sir, as to the light element, etc., how is the attainment of these elements to be attained? The light element, the beauty element, the base of infinity of space element, the base of the infinity of consciousness element, and the base of nothingness element. These elements are to be attained as attainments with perception. The base of neither perception nor non-perception element. This element is to be attained as an attainment with a residue of volition, sankhara. The cessation of perception and feeling element. This element is to be attained as an attainment of cessation. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha is saying that the first few light element, beauty, base of infinity of space, base of infinity of consciousness, base of nothingness. These are attainments with perception. Is a kind of perception. And then the base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is an attainment with a residue of volition. In this state of neither perception nor non-perception, the consciousness is almost going away. It's almost. Sometimes there is perception, sometimes there is no perception. This perception is, if you have perception, means you have consciousness. So sometimes, because the consciousness is about to cease, so sometimes there is consciousness, sometimes there is no consciousness. So when there is consciousness, there is a residue of volition. You still can have this volition, you can exercise volition, but when there is no perception, then you cannot exercise. That's why it's a residue of volition. And then the cessation of perception and feeling, which is also the cessation of consciousness, is an attainment of cessation, where everything ceases, consciousness ceases, all the 6 consciousness ceases. So for tonight I'll stop here. Anything to discuss? Yes, we have jhanas. The jhanas are similar. Only thing is to find a teacher who is actually accomplished in jhana is very hard to find. But in the Buddha's teachings, it is not necessary to look for a teacher, because the Buddha, in the suttas we see, it's already said that the Dhamma taught by the Buddha is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. It explains the holy life perfectly, pure as a polished conch shell. And the Buddha also stated that there is nothing more to add to his words, and we should not subtract from his words. So if we study the Buddha's words enough, the definition of jhana and all that, and how to attain jhana, everything is there. The only thing is our practice, whether we are willing to let go. If you are not willing to let go, then you can never achieve. You see, the Buddha's disciples, having learned the Dhamma, and the Buddha encouraged them to go into the deep forest and live alone. Those monks, they really let go, and when there's nothing else to let go, having let go everything, nothing else to let go, then there's nothing to disturb them. The only reason why we can't get into jhana is all our attachment. All these thoughts that arise in our mind, we look into it, it's basically all our attachment, all the thoughts that disturb us, all your worries. If you don't have all these things to worry you, there's no reason why you cannot attain jhana. The only reason we cannot attain is we cannot let go. That's why the Buddha encouraged his disciples, even after they have renounced the home life. That doesn't mean once a person renounces the home life, he has let go totally, Only on the external form he has let go. Inside, the clinging is still very strong inside. So the Buddha understood that. So after that the Buddha says, go off and live alone. Go and live alone and nobody for you to cling to. So the Buddha, there's one sutta, I think called the Nagara Vindeya Sutta, where the Buddha was in a town and at night he wanted to give a Dharma talk. He asked the lay people, what type of monk is worthy of respect? What type of monk is not worthy of respect? And they didn't know how to answer. So the Buddha said, a monk who has attained the goal of the holy life, or one who is practicing to attain the goal of the holy life, he is worthy of respect. Then they said, how do we know which monk has attained the goal of the holy life? How do we know which monk is walking the path to attain the goal of the holy life? Then the Buddha said, if the monk lives in a forest area, instead of a town, instead of a city, then he is worthy of respect. Why? Because if a monk lives in a forest area, there is no forms for him to enjoy, no TV to watch, no sounds for him to indulge in, no smells, good taste. If he have to beg for his food, he cannot choose his food. Taste and comforts of touch. So if the Buddha said, if a monk stays in the forest area, then he's willing to let go of all these 5 chords of sensual pleasure, then he's worthy of respect. The Buddha stated very clearly just now, if the Dhamma is teaching you to have revulsion, to be dispassionate towards all the conditions that give rise to suffering, namely all the things that bring you to rebirth, then that is, if the Dhamma teaches you to let go of all these things that give you worldly pleasure, that hold you on to rebirth, if you let go of them, then you're practicing the Dhamma. If the Dhamma does not teach you how to let go, then that is not the Buddha's Dhamma. No, they are considered worldly Dhamma, because in the suttas we heard the Buddha says, a monk who is practicing for the cessation of the round of rebirths, he does not do evil karma. He also does not want to do meritorious karma, because evil karma will bring you to evil rebirth. Meritorious karma will bring you to meritorious rebirth. But if a monk does not want to go for rebirth, then he does not want to do all this karma. Yes. This is different because when you say merit, it means merit in the worldly sense. But even though a monk teaches Dhamma, but in the Buddha's teachings, the priority for a monk is his own practice. It is stated somewhere in the suttas that if a monk spends a certain time of the day either to learn the Dhamma or to teach the Dhamma or to repeat the Dhamma, he has to find some time to practice tranquility of mind, to meditate. So if he spends all his time teaching, then he is not practicing what the Buddha advised. He allocates some time to practice tranquility of mind, and then he allocates some time to benefit others through the teaching of Dhamma, because the Buddha says there are 4 types of people in the world. One, he does not benefit himself and he does not benefit others. That's the worst type of person. Slightly better than him is a person who benefits others but does not benefit himself. In other words, he does, for example, social work and charity work, but he does not cultivate himself. So That is the second type. And better than him is the person who benefits himself but does not benefit others. Benefit himself meaning benefit in the spiritual way. That means he cultivates himself and he does not bother about people. He cultivates himself first. That is the third, better than the second, A lot of people think helping others is more important. But here the Buddha is saying helping yourself is more important. It's like you are in the mud, you want to help people out of the mud. You are in the mud, how can you help another person out of the mud? You must get out of the mud first before you can help another person out of the mud. That's why the Buddha says the third person, better than the second, is a person who benefits himself but does not benefit others. But the best person is a person who benefits himself and benefits others. So the best type of monk is one who practices himself and teaches others to practice. That is what the commentary says. Not what the sutta says. The sutta says definitely you must have 4 jhanas to become anagamin and arahant. For lay people, in fact, even for monks, the priority is to understand the Dhamma. Just now we just read the sutta. Understanding the Dhamma and attaining the vision of the Dhamma is much more important than getting all the psychic power. Once you understand the Dhamma, then the remaining suffering left for you is only 7 more lifetimes. Whereas if you don't understand the Dhamma, then there's countless lifetimes left for you. You will have to fall into the hell many times. So the priority is to study the suttas and understand. If you can meditate in addition, that's good. But the priority is to study the Dhamma. The Buddha's Dhamma, the suttas, the earlier suttas. Yes, obviously they don't practice. Yes. Actually, sometimes you look into this commentary, they do more damage than good. So it's very silly to take the commentary as though it was words of the Buddha. The Buddha already said they explain the holy life in his teachings perfect, and there's no need to add anymore. We just take the trouble to study all the suttas, and we have a very complete vision of the Dhamma. Okay, how to avoid this pitfall of assuming you're Sotapanna is not to assume, just to plot on, continue do your work. We should not be greedy for results. We know that our goal is to understand the Dhamma, so we just study the suttas again and again and again. And we practice our meditation. These are the 2 cornerstones of the spiritual practice. When we study the Buddha's words again and again so that we understand. And the second one is to meditate and make our mind more and more calm. And in the process, of course, there are other factors which are very important. As we understand more and more Dhamma, we should let go. Keep on letting go. The more we let go, the faster we move on the spiritual path. And then also other factors like keeping sila, good sila, and helping others so that we get some happiness, not to be selfish and all that. We should not look for people to help. If people come to us for help, then we help. If you go and look for people to help, there's no end to it. I know of some of our Buddhist friends, after meditating for many years, they don't seem to make progress, and they go and look for stray cats and stray dogs on the streets to help. I think it's a real waste of time when you have come across the true Dhamma, which is so hard to meet. The Buddha already said, look into the last 91 world cycles, he only saw 6 Buddhas who are willing to teach. 6 Buddhas only willing to teach. That means, and out of these 6, 3 of them are in our world cycle. That means the last 90 world cycles, there are only 3 Sammasambuddha, which means 30 world cycles before you meet one Sammasambuddha, before you meet the Dhamma. And one world cycle, one aeon or one kappa is so long, the Buddha says, it's difficult to imagine how long it is. So we have come across the true Dhamma and we don't appreciate it. Instead, we want to go and help cats and dogs, which there is no end to this type of work one. After you help cats and dogs, how about going and help the rats? How about going to help the insects? Going to help the birds? Where got end? No, this is rubbish. All beings are basically, we cannot help because our life, we depend on our karma. Every one of us, we are dependent on our karma, Every moment we live, we continue to live as a human being because we have the good blessing to support us. The moment our blessings is used up, immediately we will die. So nobody actually can really help another. We can help very little only by giving some food. But the most important thing is our karma. How we lead our life, whether we lead a skillful life or we lead an unskillful life, right? So these, like helping cats and dogs, is a very inferior type of charity that we are doing. The Buddha said, the highest charity is the gift of the Dhamma. The gift of the Dhamma surpasses all gifts, because when you educate a person in the Dhamma, you benefit him this lifetime, and you benefit that person many, many lifetimes to come. So if we, having known the Dhamma, then if we can learn the Dhamma and teach people the Dhamma, that is really helping. You help cats and dogs, they'll still come back as cats and dogs. How long can you help them? You see, because of our simple mind, which is blur, people think, beings in hell also we should help. You help the beings in hell to come out of hell, the first thing they do, they kill you first. And rape your daughter. That's why they are in hell. They have to go to hell to suffer before they can become better beings. So a stupid person only will think, I want to help a being in hell to come out. Both. Only thing is, nowadays, sometimes a lot of the books that we print are not really in accordance with the Buddha's teachings. So if you can print like the Nikayas and give to people, that's really good. And one of our devotees was telling me, how is it nobody is printing Nikayas? One last thing I want to say about helping people. You notice in the suttas, the Buddha said, I only teach tameable men. I only teach tameable men. The Buddha does not try to teach everybody, Only those that can be taught, only the Buddha will teach, That's why I remember when we read through the Devata Samyutta, remember Ananda, I think, he met a hunter in the forest and he tried to teach the hunter. The Deva came and scolded him, you're wasting your time, why are you going to teach this fool, he's not going to listen to you. So you see, even human beings also, we cannot help everyone. How can we help animals? So that's why the Buddha's wisdom is such. We are followers of the Buddha. We walk the Buddha's path. We practice higher wisdom. We don't practice low wisdom. So all the Dhamma, the advice the Buddha has given is so clear in the suttas. The Buddha did a lot of simple charity. The Buddha never asks us to do. Nowadays people do like liberation of what life. Fong Sang, Pang San and all that. That is... It's not that it's bad, it's good. But then there are so many more worthwhile things to do. So a person with a higher wisdom will think of higher things to do, and people with lower wisdom will think of lower things to do. Okay. Come here and here.